Hi guys, this is Miss Carballo, and today we're going to go over the Topic 8 equations test. So make sure you have your copy in front of you so you can see which problems you missed as we go through the test. All right, first question looks like this. What is the solution to? So you are solving all of these for x, and we talked about the packing and unpacking method. So this is our favorite piece of item is the A, and then we multiply it by a 4, but there's a minus sign in front of the 4. So we're multiplying it by a negative 4. If you forget that negative, it's okay. I'll show you where you have to bring it down. But then a lot of you got this wrong too. The sign in front of the number tells us if it's a positive or a negative. In other words, if it's plus or minus. And when there's nothing there, that's a positive 2. So that's what we pack at the top of our suitcase. The suitcase is just to help us figure out how to solve it because we got to go backwards and do the opposite operation. So I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides first. So a lot of you got this first one wrong because you added 2 first. But that already is an add 2. That's already a plus 2. If I switch these two terms, there would be a plus sign in front of the 2. All right, this is where you have to bring the negative sign down, the minus that's in front of the 4, and 16 minus 2 is 14. And then we got to unpack still. We still have to unpack this multiplying by a negative 4 by dividing by a negative 4. That's how we get rid of that negative. Okay, then you got, when you did this on your calculator, negative 3.5. But that wasn't an answer choice in eCart, which is fine. If you got this as your answer on your paper, I gave you full credit. But you could have also simplified this to negative 7 over 2. So both were acceptable. All right, let's jump over to here, question 2. Take a look at your paper to see if you missed this. Here is the bag. My favorite piece is the X. Here's my luggage. This case, I divide by 4 first. That's what the fraction bar means. It means you're dividing by 4 first, and then you're adding 10 second. That's the order of operations. That's how I like to pack because I'm a math teacher. Go backwards and opposite. I'm going to do the opposite of plus 10 and subtract 10 when I unpack my bag. So I'm going to subtract 10 on both sides, which leaves me with x divided by 4 still left in my bag and 24 left over here. All right, now I'm going to do the opposite of divide by 4, which is multiply by 4. That's my second step. So I'm going to multiply this side by 4 and this side by 4. And really, that's multiplying 4 on top and 4 on bottom, so I get 1. And this side equals 96. All right, let's look at number 3. So number 3 is interesting, right? Because there's a minus and a minus. So some of you pack the bag like this, P minus a negative 4. And what's the opposite of minus a negative 4? Plus a negative 4. So when you take it out, you're adding a negative 4. You don't change this sign of the number. You only change the add or subtract. So adding a negative 4 would be correct. And that would give you good guys win by 4. But some of you don't think of it that way, and you see, oh, wait, this is a minus and a plus. That's really plus positive 4. It's a big plus sign. When there's two negatives next to each other, it's really P plus 4. And P plus 4, the opposite of plus 4, is minus 4. So that's the same thing as adding negative 4. So if you just put minus 4 on both sides, that's what I would have put too, because that's the way I look at it. But this way is totally good. You'd still get 4. A lot of you got this wrong and added 4 on both sides and got 12, or you subtracted a negative 4 on both sides and you got 12. So this answer is 4. That one was a missed by a lot of you. Okay, this one too because of the fraction. So let's pack our bag first. And this is the first mistake everyone made on question 4. There's nothing in front of the 12. So that makes it a positive 12. So my first item that I like the best is my D, and the D is being multiplied by a negative 1/9. And a lot of you didn't put the negative sign in front of the 1/9, and that's okay as long as you put it down here when you're solving. Let me show you what I mean. And then I packed my bag. Last was a plus 12, and a lot of you added 12 on both sides instead of subtracting 12. Subtracting 12 should have been your first step. A lot of you didn't do that. Got to do the opposite to get rid of it. If you added 12, guys, that's 12 plus 12, which is 24. A 12 minus 12 is 0, and that's what I want left. All right, bring down, this is where you got to bring down the negative. If there's a negative in front of this, you got to bring it down here so that when you multiply on both sides, you multiply by a negative 9. All right, so what's the opposite of multiplying by 1/9? Dividing by 1/9, right? The opposite of multiplying by 1/9 is dividing by 1/9. However, we can't divide by 1/9. Like, that's just not how we do fractions. Like, we would not do 5 divided by negative 1/9. I should include that negative because it is a negative here. Instead, we change it to multiplying by the reciprocal, which means flipping that second fraction over. This is the problem. We're really multiplying both sides by a negative 9/1 because we're multiplying by the reciprocal on both sides. And I don't like that this number doesn't look like a fraction, so I put it over 1. And now I'm multiplying two fractions. And that should be easy, guys. 5 times negative 9 is a negative 45, and 1 times 1 is 1 on the bottom. So the answer to number 4 was D equals negative 45. That's probably the second most missed question. Take a look at the fraction. That makes it hard. When I do the opposite of multiply and divide by both sides by negative 9, I multiply by the reciprocal. All right, let's look at questions 5 through 8. Okay, so we've got bag to pack, favorite item, X, and this one has a big fraction bar, which means that everything on the top has to be done first, then everything on the bottom, and then you divide those two answers. So when I'm packing my bag, the plus 5 is done first, and the dividing by 30 is done last in order of operation. So now that I know the order, I can do the opposite and work backwards and do times 30 on both sides first. I will say I think most of you got this one right. So double check your work. If you multiply both sides by 30 first, then that is the correct first step. The second step to get rid of everything is subtracting 5 on both sides. And that leaves me with X equals 355, which is a big number, and some of you might have thought that was weird, but if you plugged 355 back into this X, then you would have seen on your calculator that it's right. All right, number 6. Pack my bag over here. Y is my favorite. And Y is being multiplied by a negative 5 this time. And then it's being subtracted 7. And some of you forgot to do the opposite here. But you have to add 7, on both sides to get rid of this minus 7 first. Reverse order of operations. Let me draw my line down the middle. This leaves me with 25. This leaves me with negative 5 times Y still packed in my bag. All right, do the opposite of multiplying by negative 5, and I'm going to divide both sides by a negative 5. Divide this side by negative 5. Divide this side by negative 5. And that leaves me with 1 Y. And this is a negative 5. So a lot of you that didn't bring this negative down had a positive 5 instead of a negative 5. All right, question 8. If I pack my bag, oh, I skipped 7. Why did I do that? I don't know. All right, question 7. Pack my bag over here. W goes first, times 4 goes second, minus 8 goes last in my bag. Do the opposite. So I'm going to add 8 first. I would say this question most of you got right. So I'm going to work through this quickly. I'm left with 4W equals 24. Opposite of multiplying by 4 is dividing by 4. So I'm going to divide this by 4 and this by 4. And you should have got W equals 6. All right, question 8. Let me pack N first times 2/3 second minus 6 last. Work backwards and opposite And I'm going to add 6 on both sides first to get rid of that minus 6. So 2/3 n is what's left packed in my bag, and 18 on this side. All right, I'm going to do the opposite of times 2/3, which is divided by 2/3. But just like in question 4, we can't divide 18 by 2/3. It would look like this, and you just can't do it on paper. And you can't put 0.666 in your calculator either. So we have to change it to multiplying by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So really, we're multiplying both sides by 3/2. When you divide by 2/3, it's the same thing as multiplying by 3/2. All right, I don't like that this one doesn't look like a fraction, so I like to put it over 1, and then I go straight across when you're multiplying fractions. 18 times 3 is 54, 1 times 2 is 2, so n equals 27. All right, last two problems. Okay, this one had two things that made it difficult. First, there's no sign in front of the 7. So you had to know that that's a positive 7. So really, it's an x, and there's a minus sign in front of it, and then it's being added to 7. And the opposite of minus 7 is opposite of plus 7 is minus 7. You should have been subtracting 7. If you got this wrong, most of you added. But this is already a positive 7. So you're making it a 14. If I flipped these terms, there'd be a plus sign in front of it. All right, then if you did this correctly, some of you forgot to bring down the negative in front of the x. We can't leave that there. So I gave you two options to get rid of this negative, which the first one was to just flip the sign on both sides. Make this positive x and make this a negative 5. Flip the signs. If this was positive, make it negative. This is negative, make it positive. Or what you're mathematically doing is dividing both sides by a negative 1. All right, number 10. So this tricky part is this minus sign in front of this x, which is being divided by 4. So there's my bag, and the opposite of dividing is multiplying. So most of you multiplied by 4, but this negative sign there means you're going to have to switch signs. So if you did this, some of you brought down the x and just said, oh, x is 40. But there's a minus sign in front of it. And if you didn't multiply, some of you knew right away and multiplied by a negative 4. So that's perfect because that gets rid of that minus sign. When you multiply by a negative, it gets rid of that minus sign, right? Because a negative times a negative is a positive. So what your final answer should be is x equals negative 40. So you could have either multiplied both sides by a negative 4 and gotten rid of that x right away, or you would have had to bring the negative down and then flip the signs like we did over in question 9. So these are the two final answers for 9 and 10. Check each answer, check all the steps. Hopefully this makes sense to you. Ask me questions before you do the retake, and then see me at a raise to do the retake. Hope that helped, guys. Thank you.